Tonight, something happened that Moscow spent 3 years praying would never happen. Not slowly, not quietly, not with conditions. It happened all at once. A single decision out of Washington erased the one advantage Vladimir Putin built his entire war around. And when the news reached the Kremlin, the reaction wasn't anger, it wasn't defiance. It was something far rarer. It was shock for just a moment. Captured on camera, dissected by Western intelligence, Vladimir Putin's composure cracked, the mask slipped, the confidence faltered. And in that brief instant, the world saw what Moscow never intended anyone to see: fear. Before we go any further, subscribe right now. This is not routine war coverage. This is a turning point, and you'll want to follow what happens next. Because tonight, we're breaking down what the Trump administration authorized, why the Biden White House refused for 3 years, and why Putin's reaction tells us everything about who actually holds leverage in this war. Picture the scene inside the Kremlin. On a quiet Saturday morning, Vladimir Putin seated at his long, imposing table, surrounded by his most trusted advisors. The setting is familiar, controlled, designed to project absolute authority. Around him sit the men who built Russian security policy for decades, the officials who assured him American caution would hold, who shaped military strategy around Biden's restraint, who never seriously prepared for this moment. The briefing begins as usual. Routine updates, controlled language. Then Washington comes up. Not incremental changes, not diplomatic noise. Full authorization, no restrictions. Immediate implementation. And that's when it happens. Putin reacts before he can stop himself. His jaw tightens, his eyes narrow, his hand grips the edge of the table. For a fraction of a second, the practiced calm disappears. That moment mattered. Western intelligence agencies don't analyze body language for drama. They analyze it because leaders reveal truth when strategy collapses. And what Putin revealed was simple. Everything he planned for just vanished. If you're following this so far, hit like and subscribe. This is where the story turns. For 3 years, American policy followed a predictable pattern: caution, incremental steps, carefully calibrated restrictions designed to manage escalation. Biden believed restraint prevented wider war. Putin believed it guaranteed Russian sanctuary. Both assumptions shaped the battlefield. But this week, that framework didn't bend. It shattered. Analysts who track US policy saw the warning signs building for months. Bipartisan frustration in Congress, Pentagon officials openly questioning limits, allies pushing harder, and finally, a political transition that changed the calculation entirely. When American policy changes this abruptly, it's because leaders conclude restraint is no longer preventing harm, it's prolonging it. And that's exactly what happened here. Let me be very clear about what was authorized and why the Kremlin immediately recognized it as catastrophic. The Trump administration approved unrestricted long-range strike capability for Ukraine, advanced systems previously prohibited, targeting authority without geographic limitations, real-time intelligence integration designed to allow Ukrainian forces to strike Russian military infrastructure wherever it exists. No carve-outs, no case. By case approvals, no artificial boundaries. A senior U.S. official summarized it bluntly. Fighting with one hand tied was helping Russia. If this analysis is making sense, subscribe again. The implications are massive. NATO allies confirmed coordinated implementation within hours. European defense officials described it as the moment everyone knew would eventually come. But only Washington could trigger. And here's the part that shook Moscow. For 3 years, Putin's confidence wasn't built on Russian strength. It was built on American hesitation, on the belief that Washington would always pull back at the edge of escalation. That belief is now gone. Russian territory is no longer a sanctuary. Military installations, once considered untouchable, are now legitimate targets. Defensive planning based on American restraint is obsolete overnight, and the Kremlin knows it. The response from Moscow wasn't controlled outrage. It wasn't theatrical threats. It was confusion, contradiction, emergency meetings paired with calls for negotiation. Escalatory language followed by de-escalatory signaling. That's not strategy, that's panic. And if you're still watching, make sure you're subscribed, because this next phase is where wars are decided. Russian communications intercepted in the aftermath showed genuine internal disagreement. Officials arguing over response options. No coherent line, no unified strategy, just reaction. That's why Putin's visible reaction mattered so much. The decision didn't just change policy. It exposed how fragile Russia's assumptions were. It showed that Moscow wasn't ready for this shift, and it proved something else. Putin's strategy depended on time favoring Russia, on Western patience breaking, before Russian endurance, on hesitation lasting longer than the war. This authorization destroyed that logic, and once time stops favoring you, everything accelerates. Ukraine, meanwhile, had been waiting. The capability existed. The planning was done. Only permission was missing. Now it isn't. And that creates cascading consequences Russia cannot easily reverse. Sanctuary removed, defenses stretched, psychological pressure intensified. If you value this kind of breakdown, hit subscribe one more time. This story is only getting heavier because what we're watching isn't just escalation. It's a strategic unmasking. And as we'll see next, the most dangerous phase of this war begins when leaders realize the rules they relied on no longer apply. And this is where the situation becomes far more dangerous than a simple policy shift. Because when restrictions disappear overnight, wars don't adjust politely, they destabilize. Systems built on predictability don't bend, they break. And right now, every signal coming out of Moscow suggests fracture, not control. If you want to stay ahead of what happens next, subscribe now. The pace of this war just accelerated. Russian military planners are now being forced to redraw threat maps they believed were settled. Air defense units once positioned to protect the front lines are being dragged inward to shield cities, command centers, logistics hubs, and infrastructure that was never supposed to be threatened. That single change carries enormous consequences. Every system pulled back weakens Russia somewhere else. Every radar redeployed creates a blind spot. Every defensive layer added deep inside Russia thins the line where the fighting actually happens. Ukraine understands this perfectly. This authorization doesn't just give Ukraine more options. It overloads Russian planning. Moscow is now trying to defend everything at once, and no military, especially one already stretched thin, does that well. If this breakdown is helping you see what's really happening beneath the headlines, hit like and subscribe. This is where wars are decided. But the military consequences are only half the story. The psychological damage may be even more severe. Putin's power has always rested on projecting inevitability. The idea that he sees further, plans longer, and understands the battlefield better than everyone else. That image is critical inside Russia. It's what keeps elites aligned and dissent contained. And that image cracked. Not behind closed doors. Not in private cables, on camera. Inside the Kremlin, that moment didn't go unnoticed. Senior officials saw it. Security services saw it. Military commanders saw it. And once a leader's confidence visibly falters, loyalty quietly becomes conditional. If you're still watching, subscribe again, because internal dynamics inside Russia matter just as much as missiles and drones. History shows us that authoritarian systems are most unstable, not when they are losing battles, but when they lose confidence in their own leadership. When blame starts circulating, when failures need explanations, when someone has to answer for why assumptions were wrong. And there are a lot of assumptions collapsing right now. Putin assumed American hesitation would last. He assumed restrictions would survive elections. He assumed Ukraine's reach would remain limited. He assumed time favored Russia. Every one of those assumptions just failed. Now he faces a narrowing set of options. Escalate recklessly and risk uncontrollable consequences. Hesitate and appear weak, or attempt negotiations from a position that is suddenly far less secure. None of those choices are comfortable. If this kind of analysis is valuable to you, make sure you're subscribed. The coming weeks will demand context, not noise. What makes this phase especially volatile is timing. Putin is already managing pressure on multiple fronts. Military leaders want resources that don't exist. Economic advisors want relief that may not come. Security services want scapegoats for intelligence failures, and the public wants answers that propaganda can no longer fully supply. Now add a strategic shock that removes the one advantage Russia counted on most. That combination is combustible. Ukraine, meanwhile, is entering this phase with momentum. The capabilities were already in place. The planning was already done. The only missing piece was permission. Now that barrier is gone, but this moment is fleeting. Psychological shocks decay. Adversaries adapt. Systems recalibrate. Ukraine's challenge now is to exploit this window before Russia regains footing, without pushing the situation into uncontrollable escalation. And that balance is incredibly difficult. If you're still here, subscribe once more. This isn't just about Ukraine or Russia anymore. It's about how wars change when restraint disappears. Analysts are already warning that the most dangerous period of any conflict is not when escalation begins, but when one side realizes its old strategy no longer works and hasn't yet found a new one. That's when improvisation replaces planning. That's when mistakes happen, And that's exactly where we are tonight. Putin is no longer operating from confidence. He's operating from damage control, from reaction, from a need to restore an image that just fractured publicly. And leaders in that position don't always choose wisely. So bring this back to the moment that started it all. That instant in the Kremlin when Vladimir Putin learned that everything he was counting on had vanished. That moment wasn't just symbolic. It was strategic collapse. Because once a leader realizes their opponent's restraint was a choice, not a limitation, the entire war has to be rethought. That realization can't be undone. And Putin's face told the world he knows it. Tonight, one truth stands above everything else. Trump did what Biden would not. American hesitation ended. Russian sanctuary disappeared. And the psychological balance of this war shifted in a single moment. The Kremlin is scrambling, not theatrically, not performatively, but genuinely. And when a system built on control begins scrambling like this, it means we've entered a far more dangerous phase. This story is far from finished. The next moves will come quickly. And when moments like this arrive, history doesn't pause to give anyone time to adjust. Stay informed, stay alert, and don't look away.